Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you're not a malicious soul, consider doing the nice thing and hitting the like and subscribe buttons down below. That said, our first story of the day is by CBN 1015 HYD 2028. It doesn't make it faster for us to be on the phone. I work on an IT help desk. It is what you think it is. One of the things we support is mobile phones. However, the company my company supports, and the one I'm on the desk for, has supplied us and the user with handy-dandy guides on how to do pretty much everything that's needed on mobile phones. It's really airtight, and I love directing people to the guide because it has video and steps on how to do things. They can find it on the internet in the IT section. However, since the average caller never reads the guides, we often get callers who think that we can magically do things over the phone to fix it. These are people who get up, get dressed, tie their shoelaces, and completely forget how to do anything but breathe when they get on the phone to us. You think that's hyperbole, but I've been asked which finger they need to use to tap the phone. One such user logged a ticket and demanded a call back from an expert. He was given the user guide link and oh boy, did not like that. He called and got through to me, and I explained that we have the exact same guide and that I'd only be reading it out to him over the phone as he read on his end. Naturally, he didn't listen to a word I said and demanded I help him because he doesn't have time for the guide, and he'd rather speak to a tech person to sort it out. Cue malicious compliance. I spent an hour and 20 minutes on the phone, slowly going through the guide word for word and making sure he'd followed every step. I even got it on his laptop screen that I can access. He asked several times if we were almost done, to which I reiterated, you can come back to this at your leisure using the guide on the intranet. Mobile phones are not managed in the same way as computers. We can't remote access it and fix things. He had meetings, lunch, all sorts of things lined up that got shifted out of whack on his calendar, and every message he received on his laptop that he answered, I made sure to go back a couple of steps just to confirm what we'd done so far. He wanted to speak to an expert, so I just made the guide speak through me. Sadly, having the slightest touch of dealing with support tickets, personally, no matter what you can do, there's always going to be somebody that, for some reason, they have this imaginary cloak around their brain when it comes to technology where, even though there's step by step exactly what you have to do to fix whatever or to achieve whatever, they're too afraid to do it, or they overthink it and they think it's impossible, I can't do it, you do it, or they refuse to understand. Have you ever known anybody that was so insistent on not being able to do anything with technology, even though a lot of the times what they're wanting to do is really easy? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Juicy Fruit. I expect this parking situation to be solved immediately without additional emails or text messages. Okay, done. I'm a building manager and I took over 2 residential apartment blocks. Part of my duties include assigning parking spots. Due to incompetence and neglect of the previous management company, I inherited a parking lot which was a complete organizational disaster. Multiple tenants believing they had been assigned the same spot, tenants parking in spots but not paying, etc. And of course the parking map, which is supposed to be regularly updated, had not seen an update in almost 16 months. A situation arose where 2 tenants were fighting over the same parking spot. Instead of coming to management to resolve, they engaged in a nasty gram war, which consisted of them leaving mean notes on each other's car. Eventually this dispute spilled over, and I was contacted by one of them. The conversation was simple but plain. I expressed understanding about their frustration and asked specific questions to help figure out who was originally assigned that parking spot. I explained how previous management failed to maintain order in the parking map and that I would cheerfully resolve the issue. Instead of replying to my simple questions, when were you assigned the spot, when did you sign your lease, they sent me an all-caps email which, in part, read, I do not have to answer any questions and I expect this parking situation to be resolved immediately with no more emails or text messages. Well, if they had just answered my questions, I could have resolved the situation. I suspected they were the original tenant assigned the spot, and it was indeed theirs. But since they would not answer questions and insisted on resolution immediately, I did what I could. I assigned the other tenant that spot, and I replied, in order to resolve the issue without communication, you're now assigned spot number 64. If you continue to park in spot 35, you will be towed immediately as it is now assigned to a different tenant. I gave them the spot right next to the dumpsters. Now they can enjoy the stench of rotting garbage and a cloud of wasps every trip to the car. which is also 100 meters further away from the doors. 2 days later, they approached me in person and apologized for their behavior. I said, "No worries, I don't hold grudges." They asked if I could reassign them their old spot. No. See, what I don't understand here is if somebody new moves in to take over the situation and they say, "Okay, so I need to know who first had this spot," or "When did you register the spot?" If you know you had it first or you know you had it earlier, I feel like there should be no reason for you not to want to prove that as soon as you can. This person was all high and mighty on entitlement, saying, "You gotta solve this on your own without any help." There's really no great shock as to why they lost their place. Should've just helped. Our next story is by an anonymous poster. "Lodge a formal complaint to try and force me to comply? Will do, sir. With pleasure." I work in the legal sector, so a lot of this will be vague for reasons. Our clients are all vulnerable in some way, and we're responsible for managing their financial affairs. This includes all aspects from something as small as making sure they have money for food shopping to acting for them in litigation proceedings. One client of mine has historically always been very wealthy, and all their family know it and have enjoyed their wealth in one way or another during his lifetime. In our role, we're encouraged to work closely with the person's family members/close friends to ensure we get an idea of what the incapacitated person would have wanted, etc. It's like walking a tightrope with client confidentiality every day and can be quite difficult to navigate as most nosy family members don't like being told no. The client's now incapacitated, and we control their finances. We're also in the middle of their divorce proceedings, which I'm sure most people know means exchanging various financial and property info with the other side. We've corresponded with a distant family member a few times during our work for this client. I'll call them C. C is a pain in the butt and believes they're entitled to our urgent attention whenever he demands it. He's not the client, nor paying our costs, and also thinks that because he's mentioned in our client's will that he's entitled to any and all financial information about my client that he asks for. If he doesn't get it from me, he'll email my other colleagues. If not from them directly, then to my boss. We've tried to be as transparent as possible with C, as per our professional guidelines. Recently, as legal proceedings are wrapping up, he's become more and more confrontational. His most recent email to a junior team member was simply unacceptable, so he didn't respond. He's not entitled to a response, as he's not a client. Now, C was not going to take this lying down. As our role is obviously very important in terms of a vulnerable person, we're overseen by a government body, and people can complain to them if they think we're acting in a way which puts the vulnerable person at risk. C lodged a complaint that we weren't doing right by our client, as we were alienating the family. This leads to a lot of non-chargeable admin work for me, as we need to formally respond to the government body. It was obvious that C did this to force our hand, to tell him things he was not authorized to know, as he expected us to fear the backlash from this body, as his latest email threatened, but this is where the malicious compliance came in. I drafted a 2-page response with every communication we had with him to prove we had been as open as possible. This made it very obvious the sort of info C was eager to get without me accusing him of anything. The government body reviewed the response and conveniently noted that C was asking for confidential information. As a result, we were put on notice by the government body to keep contact with him to a minimum to protect client confidentiality, and formally warned him of misusing the safeguarding process and that the court would be made aware. The response to him went out at 4 p.m. on Friday, so he had to sit and seethe by himself all weekend. Now he won't get any information about our client, and we won't be penalized for ignoring the family of a vulnerable client. I definitely don't envy the people who work in jobs like this. There's really no great winning in these kinds of jobs because, as I'm sure most of you guys can imagine, when there's a relative that has money that's now somewhat available or is a little blurry as to who's going to get it or have access to it, a lot of family members kind of sell themselves out and their familial bonds to try to get their hands on it. They'll scrap with each other just to fight to try to get a taste of that money or possessions. This next story is by Peppermint Biscuit, Trick or Treat. I was talking to somebody recently about trick-or-treating and was reminded of this bit of childish compliance from long ago. Trick-or-treating where I live is generally easy in normal times. Ring the doorbell, say trick-or-treat, get candy and compliments on your costume, next house, repeat. Of course, there's always houses that like to switch things up. There was one house in my neighborhood that would get skipped by the younger kids because the guy there would always pull out all the stops to try and scare you. A few would say, okay, here's a trick, and show some lame magic trick before laughing and dispensing the expected candy. There were rumors of people who would ask you to sing a song before they would give you candy. I only ever came across one guy who did. As I was approaching the house, I saw there was a girl on the doorstep who was taking longer than usual. It turned out the guy was making her sing for her treat. She was doing it half-heartedly, just wanting to get on to the next house already, and he was insisting she try harder, sing louder, and keep going. Finally, he gave her a single candy and she left. Trick or treat, I said dutifully. I already knew what I was going to do. He looked at me with a smug expression, bowl of treats held out of reach. Sing me a song, he demanded. I belted it out. This is the song that never ends. He couldn't put the candy in my bag fast enough. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends. If you know the song and you know you're gonna be there for a while, I'd imagine the guy wanted to give the candy over. That said, who is gonna be standing there demanding these kids sing for a piece of candy? I don't know about you guys, but that just kinda seems weird to me. Just odd. This next story is by Dalmonte, Doing What We Were Told, a joint malicious compliance. So this is a story about a major management fail that we tried to warn them about, but they told us to just carry on. The company I worked for at the time got a major contract to provide life assurance products to the major bank in the country. So they set up a team that would deal with only the larger contracts, 1 million British pounds plus, and promised really quick turnaround times and high customer service standards. They set this team up before the contract was set up, so this team of go-getters sat around for 6 weeks with no work and no manager waiting for the applications to come in, which caused some major cliques and rivalries, so when the paperwork started coming in, we didn't work together at all well. Our manager was pretty useless and just fueled the fires, and her boss was just a useless lad who took ladies back to the offices after nights out. He was so useless and was a guy who just used other people's work to say how great he was. He also bullied our manager to try and get us to do more work with less customer service. I remember being specifically told I couldn't give customer service, but just get people off the phone to process more applications. So 6 months after the contract started, the company wanted to know if we had been following our contracted turnaround times, so we did an audit of all the cases to see if we had hit our contracted agreed turnaround time. And we hadn't hit any on any of the cases. We told her manager, who said, just forward the spreadsheets to her, who then forwarded to her boss, pointing out the issues, who didn't read the email because he was too busy being the big man, and forwarded to the bank. The proverbial hit the fan, we were reorganized and he was put on projects, which usually meant in that company being managed out. Somehow he redeemed himself and was put in charge of a call center, which missed every target again, and he was finally sacked. We got more support, and the agreement was changed so we had realistic service agreements, and the service was expanded to the whole of the company for higher net worth applications, and moved into the underwriting department. You gotta love that this guy was so bad at their job, or so bad at doing anything in their job, that a terrible report with all of the terrible statistics were laid in his hands. And he was like, alright, here you go, bank. I'm the big man. The analogy in my head is a box overfilled with heavy paperwork. It gets handed higher up, and finally the last guy is this manager. And he looks at it and goes, cool, hands it to the bank, and then the bottom of this box finally collapses and all the paperwork smashes against the ground. If only we could have seen this coming. And our final story of the day is by Professor Egghead. You like these pictures? Sure, here's some more. Background info. Every year, my dad goes to Germany for a few days on a motorcycle with a friend of his. He often sends pictures of the view from the hotel, a perfect schnitzel, etc. One day, he sent his colleague a picture of a cake he had in the morning. A colleague said jokingly, "Now that's what we want to see." And so my dad complied. He's been sending them a picture of a cake he has for every day of his little getaway for the past 3 years. As long as the colleague is a good sport about it, it seems like a nice little tradition was made out of it, honestly. Sounds honestly like a thing that in this trip has become a thing to look forward to for OP's dad. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.